This week, I celebrate that 100 days ago, I started telling stories on Substack. And today, I would like to share with you three major things that I have discovered about myself, about writing in general, during these past 100 days. First of all, I did not start writing only 100 days ago. It's just that I started to post on a daily basis short stories on Substack. I had been writing since January the 1st. That was, I think, the best New Year's resolution I've ever taken, was to start writing this fantasy novel that I had dreamed about writing for most of my life and just never gave myself permission to do so. So I started to write every single day, but it was this huge project. And of course, since I am a total noob when it comes to writing a fantasy novel, I'm a little bit familiar with the genre because of, the books that I read and love, and I wanted to write something in that same vein. However, coming up with an entire world and with characters and learning how to build story arcs and character development and all that, it was so massive that it took forever to actually make progress. And so when I started to write these short stories, the main reason was that I felt that I was in it over my head. I was trying to tackle a project that was way too big for someone with so little experience that I had. Now, of course, obviously every writer has to start somewhere, and yeah, it's my first book, so it's probably not going to be my best book. You have to start writing, you have to practice over and over again in order to make any progress. But the thing that I noticed was, because this story was so big and there were so many layers in there, and I was trying to build a narrative arc that would span an entire trilogy, all the big dreams that a lot of aspiring writers have when they start writing their first novel, that I just kept going back and I had to revise and redo what I did, which of course in itself is also a bit of a trap, that you start to constantly second guess yourself and start over and over again. But that first draft just didn't get done. And so 100 days ago, I told myself, well, what if I start to practice, but start small? I'm not going to stop writing my novel, but in addition, every day I'm going to try to write at least a small story, and it can just be one character, it can be one event, it can be one fun idea, but I don't have to worry about all these bigger developments. And instead, I can focus on trying to tell the best story that I can within 800, 1,000 words max. And that's what I committed myself to do. And I have been writing every single day, most of the days, short stories. And it's only in the last few weeks that I'm starting to focus more on bigger stories, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I wrote a total of 77 stories. I just the other day completed 2 more stories, and they are all a bit in the, you could say, fantasy fairy tale genre. Very short stories with a bit of a twist. Well, you may have read some of them. You kind of know my style. And I have seen tremendous progress. I've noticed how quickly I was able to come up with new ideas. Also because I didn't have to worry about the bigger picture. And what was, I think, the best yield of this whole, you could say, exercise, was that there were a few short stories that I just couldn't forget about. There were a few characters, there was a certain genre of story that just kept talking to me, and it gave me an idea to maybe take a few of those short stories, bundle them together, give them the same protagonist, and then expand upon it and see if I can build that up into a novel. So sometimes these short stories can actually lead to much bigger stories, but starting small is what I think gave me the green light, at least mentally and creatively. And so I would recommend that to anyone who is currently struggling with this big story that you'd like to tell. Start small, not to replace what you're doing, but do it as kind of like a daily exercise. It is like learning how to cook. You don't start with a 5-course meal. No, start with a simple recipe. One day you'll do a soup. The other day you'll try to make ramen. And then, of course, study the masters. That's something else that I did. Once I started to specialize in this short story genre, I started reading a lot of other short stories on Substack. And I think the Substack is a treasure trove of amazing storytellers. And a lot of them, a lot of the excellent storytellers only have a very, very small audience. And so I felt like I was like like an Indiana Jones, finding all sorts of gems all over Substack, and that in turn also motivated me to continue to improve my craft. The second thing that I have discovered over the course of these 100 days is that sometimes you have to step out of your day-to-day life, step out of your usual environment, which is this tiny office where I started to write in the middle of the winter because this is a small room and it was easy to heat, in contrast with the rest of my house, which was very cold over the winter. And so this is my happy place. When I'm here, my mind automatically switches to writing mode. But that can also be a trap, in the sense that I noticed that the more I enjoyed writing the short stories, the harder it was to get back to the big multi-layered story and all those complex story threads that I was trying to weave in. And so, not so long ago, I had a couple of weeks off and I decided to go to Ireland on this writing retreat. And you may have seen the videos that I posted about that retreat. It was the best decision I have taken since I started writing. And again, it was the fact that I stepped out of my busy life, because of course, writing is just a side project. I have a lot of other things that I normally focus on during the day. But having, almost 3 weeks, during which I could solely focus on developing this novel and to try to tell the entire story. And of course, I'm the only destination for that story. I need to tell this story to myself. And I went on very long walks. Sometimes I would walk like 8 hours or 9 hours every day. And I would just walk and think about the story. And what helped was that I was walking in Ireland, and that is where my story takes place. And so being in that environment really helped me to stay focused on that story. And so at the end of my writing retreat, I had the rough draft. And then I shelved it because I know that in order to have an effective revision process, you have to learn how to read your novel as if you are the reader and not the writer. So I've left it on the shelf for a couple of weeks now, and I'm about to go back to that first draft. And I already know that it's not going to be very good. Not to mention that I've already learned so much after completing that first draft. But I know that now that I've learned even more, it's going to be a very fruitful revision process, because now I can probably notice much more, what's wrong with the story or what needs to be completed or changed than I would be able to tell when I was still in the middle of developing that story. And so I am prepared to go through this very long, arduous process, because I know that this is all going to contribute to my, sounds very pretentious to say that, to my writing career. But I know that I should take advantage. I'm not rushing anything. I have the short stories that I write. I have this other project that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And that's like instant gratification. That's a lot of fun to do. But this novel, this big story that I'm trying to tell, I'm going to take as much time as I need to make that as good as I can. And it's still not going to be very good because it's my first novel. That's not a problem. But I want to take full advantage of all these various phases and take the time to go through all these phases of rewriting and redaction and everything, because that's how you learn how to write. And it will only benefit anything else I'm going to write in the future. Speaking of which, the third big thing that I've done in these past 100 days, and that is really, right now, it's the project that I'm most excited about, more than I'm excited about the short stories, which, I really enjoy writing those. Even better, I think, than my first novel, which is I don't know. Sometimes I get very serious about that story because there's so much at stake. It's so much a story that is about the things that I value most in life. But after I shelved this first novel, the first draft of my first novel, I immediately started to write a second novel. Now, this is advice that I've gotten from a lot of authors: is just don't stop writing. Don't take a vacation. Just stay in that flow, in that creative flow. And I previously told you that there were a few short stories that I wrote among the 77 that I produced that stayed with me. And one of them was about this dragon rider, this young woman who joins kind of a police force in a big sprawling fantasy city. And she joins Dragon Patrol. And it's like a serialized police series on TV. But they don't have cars, they have dragons. And it was just this simple idea that gave me so many ideas for chapters, for things that could happen. And what I did was to blend my experience with writing these short stories with the experience of writing a longer novel. And what I wanted to do was to approach this new story, Dragon Patrol, in the same way as the writers of Star Trek approached their seasons. I am currently watching Deep Space Nine, and what I love about Star Trek, and I've always loved about Star Trek, is that you have each episode as a standalone. It's only later on that they started to weave in these bigger, this bigger mythology. Deep Space Nine is a good example of that. It has an overarching story and an overarching conflict, but then every episode is in itself something you can watch out of order because it's got a beginning, it's got development, it's got a surprise, and it's got a good ending. And I told myself, well, what if I love writing these short stories because it's so liberating. I don't have to worry much about what the implications are. So what if every chapter of Dragon Patrol is a story in itself? It's like a TV episode. I'm going to make it bigger than the short stories. Short stories are about 800, 1,000 words. What if I write each story per chapter of about 5,000 words? And then I would only need to write 14 adventures of Dragon Patrol, and I would have, 70,000 words. So that's a book. And the thing that I learned from Star Trek was how even though you have these individual stories, the events in the story do impact the characters. The main characters of the crew do evolve, and sometimes stuff will leave a permanent mark. Think of Picard being taken captive by the Borg. That stays with him for the rest of his life, at least in the Star Trek universe. And that was something that really appealed to me. So once I just started to tell these fantasy police stories, and it was so much fun because it's very tropey. Obviously, it's also another thing that I love to do was to build up another team. Like my fantasy novel has a team of monks and sisters. Here I have a team of very different people. There's a dwarf, there's a half troll, there is some humans, and dragons, of course. And I loved kind of playing around with these characters and see how they interact. But then I was already developing ideas for a bigger story. And the fun thing is that the more adventures I told, the clearer that overarching story became. And it's now really, really, really good. At least I love the bigger arc and what will happen to Kaelin. And it's way more complex than I originally planned. And that's another thing that I discovered in the process of writing Dragon Patrol, is that with my novel about the story majors, I planned everything in advance, and I just went back to the drawing board time and again, making sure that everything fits. There are no, big plot holes and everything. Here, I was like, let's just see where this story takes me. This morning, before I started recording this, I actually worked on an outline for this first book, because now that I've written all 14 chapters, and I did that in the span of 3 weeks. I can barely believe it. It is just amazing. And anyway, I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just grateful for this creative explosion and how much this particular story has kind of liberated my creativity. But I went back and I kind of wrote down all the chapters and what happens, and since I now know what needs to happen in this first collection of 14 chapters, I can insert kind of the little warning signs and insert characters that will come back in the end. So there's a lot. It's a bit of an extra puzzle that I'm doing, but I also wrote down, what if this story connects with my other novel? And that was something I did not see coming, and it's very recent. I was thinking, well, the thing is, my first novel is a medieval fantasy story. My second novel is more urban fantasy. Sure, it's in a fantasy world, but it reflects our modern cities in many ways, and also the kind of the police dynamics. And yet, something told me that it would be a good idea to blend these two worlds to make sure that this is all taking place in one coherent world. The reason is, it's easier to market. It's easier to motivate people to, if they love this story, then you might want to read this series as well, which takes place in the same world. It's much easier to build up a coherent treasure trove of stories if you choose one world. It's a bit like the Cosmere of Brandon Sanderson, although I wanted to make it much smaller. So the way I did this was, well, of course we're going to keep the first story in the Middle Ages. We're going to keep Dragon Patrol in the future of those events in the first novel, and it's going to take place not in Ireland, not in Scotland. The first novel is starting in Ireland, but then I came up with this idea, and again, it's so cool, and it will allow me to go just in any direction. What if there is another land that has all these Celtic elements from Brittany and France, from the Scottish Celtic culture, from the Gaelic culture in Ireland? And what if all that blends in a new world, an island between the north of Ireland and Scotland? And I was thinking of the Hebrides, or how do you pronounce it? I don't know. This range of islands, and I'm thinking there's a lot of sea there. What if there is actually an island there, but it is protected by magic? It's like Wakanda with magic. So it is invisible. You can only enter there if you know how to pass the magical barrier. I could bring in people from all these different Celtic areas. Maybe even as refugees. I have some ideas on how I'm going to mix those stories. And then what will happen in Dragon Patrol is it is still a story that is very kind of feels Celtic. It has Irish elements. It's got Scottish elements. It even has monks. It has a lot of the stuff that I've been building up in my first novel series. But it's centuries later. And it's an interesting exercise for me to imagine what will happen with those story mages, with those monks, and how a couple of hundred years later, are these monks still around? And so I came up with this whole backstory of where the story mages went and where they are now, and what is happening in that city, and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger. The one challenge I have now that I'm developing book 2 and book 3 as well, at least in terms of the outline, is how can I still make sure that the book series retains this serialized format? Because I really love to picture this as a TV series, where in theory I could post one of those stories online on Substack and just open it up to the general public and say, hey, read this story. You like this? Do you know what happened before? Do you know what happens next? But they will still have a complete experience of a good story that has a satisfying ending. And then they want to be around in this world for longer. Then, yeah, go and get that book, So it's so much fun. And I am already so attached to both groups of characters, both in the medieval novel and also in this Dragon Patrol novel. I just love these characters, and I maybe there are going to be some other characters that will be introduced in the subsequent novels, but I'm going to take my time. For now, I'm going to try to focus as much as I can on both. So basically, what I do now have is I have a complete rough draft of the medieval novel, and I've got basically, the chapters, the 14 chapters of the Dragon Patrol novel in various stages of development. Some are almost finished, and others are just, okay, so this happens and this happens, and then this will be the reveal, and I still need to work on the prose and on everything. But I never, ever, ever expected to be this far ahead after only 100 days. So I'm going to wrap things up by saying thank you for having joined me on this journey, by reading my short stories on Substack, by sometimes commenting. I really want to say a huge thank you to my sponsors, the people that, with their small monthly donations, enable me to do this, because obviously none of these books are on the market yet. So it's all I'm investing and investing and investing, and it's not certain that I will ever get let's say a monetary return on investment, but it's because of my friends are investing in me so that I can do this for you. If you want to join that group of sponsors, if you have a little bit of spare change that you'd like to invest in this writing endeavor, then you can go to my website, fatherroderick.com/join, and sign up for one of the tiers there. And of course, I might set up also some donations on Substack, but the stuff is already in place on my website. And the advantage is, of course, nobody takes a cut. It is your investment 100% goes to sustaining my creative efforts. So thank you if you're able to do that. And of course, I'm thinking, can I do something in return? Well, obviously, I wanna give my investors first access to these books. So and since I'm going to publish them as ebooks, distribution is not going to be too hard. Anyway, I might have some other ideas on how you can support me. Your most important support is you being here, you following me in this process, knowing that I'm not doing this all by myself, like in a creative void, but having this back and forth every week means the world to me and motivates me every single day of the week. So thank you so much for being there. Thanks for reading my stories, and we'll talk soon. God bless.